we mentioned earlier, this is one of those, the next section we're about to get into is there is no way to summarize this without detracting from it. There's no condensed, annotated, version that we can give that will not detract from it. Maybe if we would have went back and looked at how Reader's Digest back in the late 40s, early 50s had done it, maybe, but it's still worth it to read this. So what we're going to go into next is we're going to quote a couple of pages of this book to you. Okay. So I'm sorry, not sorry. And we are going to include the text of this in the description whenever we post this, whether it's Locals, YouTube, wherever. And so you can follow along with us if you want. Hopefully you do. Hopefully you can pull up the PDF or whatever, or you just got the book. But we've divided this into 3 sections that we'll kind of talk about. But this is so important, so important, and relates to today that I don't know how else to do it other than just quoting it. I mean, do you have anything to add, Kevin, before I start reading this?
No,
I mean, it's just
when you said no one could paraphrase this down. I'm like, well, there were some people who could do it in the condensed version, and even Hayek was surprised they were able to do it effectively.
Right. He said he couldn't do it. He's like, I could not.
Like he didn't even try. But luckily, those people understood that us Americans, because it was condensed for the American version, us Americans don't like to read too much.
Yep.
Make it into a movie, they said.
Can you fit it in a vine? Remember vines?
Yeah.
Okay.
Spielberg do it.
That's right. Yeah. All right, here we go. It is not difficult to deprive the great majority of independent thought, but the minority who will retain an inclination to criticize must also be silenced. We have already seen why coercion cannot be confined to the acceptance of the ethical code underlying the plan according to which all society is directed. Since many parts of this code will never be explicitly stated, since many parts of the guiding scale of values will exist only implicitly in the plan itself in every detail, in fact, every act of government must become sacrosanct and exempt from criticism. Sacrosanct is like sacred, holy. You cannot criticize it, right? If people are to support the common effort without hesitation, greater good, for example, they must be convinced that not only the end aimed at, but also the means chosen are the right ones. The official creed to which adherence must be enforced will therefore comprise all the views about facts on which the plan is based. Again, sacrosanct. Public criticism or even expression of doubt must be suppressed because they tend to weaken public support. As the Webb's report of position in every Russian enterprise, quote, whilst the work is in progress, any public expression of doubt or even fear that the plan will not be successful is an act of disloyalty and even treachery because of its possible effects on the will and on the efforts of the rest of the staff, end quote. When the doubt or fear expressed concerns not the success of a particular enterprise, but of the whole social plan, it must be treated even more as sabotage. So mere doubt is sabotage. It's harm, violence maybe. Facts and theories must thus become no less the object of an official doctrine than views about values. This is the opposite of the scientific method, by the way, folks. Facts and theories are a thing that are constantly there to be criticized to figure out if they're true or not and to be refined, but they're saying no. And the whole apparatus for spreading knowledge, the schools and the press. Wow, that doesn't have any. Radio and motion picture, so big tech and Hollywood. Again, no application here whatsoever. Will be used exclusively to spread the views which, whether true or false, will strengthen the belief in the rightness of the decision taken by the authority. And all information that might cause doubt or hesitation will be withheld. Once again, it's not just about lying to people. It's about keeping them from the truth. It's about keeping any alternative perspectives away from them. The probable effect on the people's loyalty to the system becomes the only criterion for deciding whether a particular piece of information is to be published or suppressed. I'm going to read that again. The probable effect on the people's loyalty to the system is the only criterion for deciding whether a particular piece of information is to be published or suppressed. Not truth, not moral value, nothing else. It's just, hey, is this in line with the plan or not? Period. That's the filter. The situation in a totalitarian state is permanently and in all fields the same that it is elsewhere in some fields in wartime. Again, war on drugs, war on COVID. Everything which might cause doubt about the wisdom of the government or create discontent will be kept from the people. The basis of unfavorable comparisons with conditions elsewhere, how are they doing? Maybe we could do that instead. The knowledge of possible alternatives to the course of action taken. Hey, we maybe tried this. Information which might suggest failure on the part of the government to live up to its promises. Maybe these vaccines don't work as we were promised. Or to take advantage of opportunities to improve conditions. Do lockdowns work? All will be suppressed. There is consequently no field, no area, no realm, no aspect of your life, private, public, personal, whatever, where the systemic control of information will not be practiced and uniformity of views not enforced. They have to inject the plan everywhere. Once they decide on what it is, true or false, it could be true. It could be true. And that's one of the problems. We don't know. This system is incapable of telling us what is true. That's the problem. Because it will filter out all doubt, anything that goes against it in every situation, right? So this has to infect everything, media. I mean, he says it right there, schools and education and the print, the news, the radio and television, right? You know, video killed the radio star.
Motion
and then
picture.
That's right. Yeah, VHS. But seriously, everything has to align around the plan and the rightness of those enforcing the plan, right? So you see this clip on Twitter yesterday, Stephen Colbert and Chuck Schumer dancing around like a bunch of pieces of shit that they are, you know, and it's like, this is, they all agree with each other. It's all this same muck of propagandistic bullshit, but that's how this thing works. And you cannot be exposed to even doubts, to even alternatives, to other perspectives. Why do you think, and this last thing I'll say, why do you think that not one country, or not one news agency, corporate press, whatever, ran a story about how America is in the minority of countries globally that recommends these experimental vaccines for pregnant women? We're in the minority. Most countries don't. Even the WHO is like, no. And the WHO is like, probably not with kids, right? Also, booster shots, probably not a good idea. All right, so that's not me tinfoil hatting. It's just the WHO, which is, by the way, beholden to China, you know, but even the WHO is like, not a good idea. Why do you think that we're not hearing about the people marching against this stuff in France? Or again, why countries like Germany and stuff are like, you know, we'll hear about these other countries when what they're doing goes along with what our establishment wants. Hey, maybe we should try gun control like Australia or New Zealand or whatever. Maybe we should try lockdowns like these other countries. But when those other countries are like, hey, probably not for pregnant women, we don't have enough information. It could be good. Again, might be fine. We don't know. But this system is incapable of telling you whether or not something is true. But that is suppressed. It has to be suppressed. You cannot be given alternative perspectives. This is so crucial, people. If you're watching this, it's so crucial to understand the difference between just lying to someone and also included in that shielding them from all other alternative perspectives. They are effectively the same thing. You cannot determine what's true in that kind of system. And that's where we're at. And that's what Hayek's talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah, he begins this section by saying it is not difficult to deprive the great majority of independent thought. I think that on its face is easy, but think about why they do it. It is that it's not difficult to convince the majority to deprive themselves of their ability to think independently. I think that's important. They freely give it up. Again, that's the sales pitch. You don't want to convince, you don't want to say this is good for this, and this reason. You want them to say, wow, this is good for me for this, and this reason. They're
Spontaneous,
like,
produce
exactly.
it. Yeah.
They have to produce it, and also allowing them to freely give it up is important. And then allowing those people who freely give it up to turn on the people as the out group who don't want to freely give it up and say, you guys are the problem. You guys are ruining everything for us who voluntarily gave all this stuff up. Stop ruining our lives, right? Why don't you just go along with the plan, right? So it's the independent minded minority that won't stand for the groupthink that must be silenced by those who want to have complete control of the narrative and the information apparatus. So like we talked about before, mainstream media, Hollywood, entertainment, big tech platforms who now act, this is important here, they act as the public square. That's important. Yep. This is the public square now. And when I say public square, as I was kind of writing up, my thoughts on this, I'm like, does the real physical public square exist anymore? Kind of, not really. You can go to the grocery store, you can go to a baseball game, you can talk about stuff. Sure. COVID hits, those are no longer options in a lot of areas.
Well, so define the public square, define that for people, because people might have a different view of that. But what the public square is specifically is incredibly important, especially in the context of big tech discussion.
Where you can freely exchange ideas without the fear of a third party coercive power coming in there and say, stop saying that, or you can't say that. Right.
Yep.
So it's important. That's why, stuff I'm not comfortable saying all my views on Facebook because people might take it the wrong way. Right. When I say I don't believe Black Lives Matter because I don't believe there's such a thing as a Black life, that's not great to say on Facebook. You're getting a lot of pushback on that. Maybe a fact checker is going to come in.
That's not true. I don't know which.
Yeah. Right. So I get to go out to a baseball game or, just go out and hang out. I play softball. I play all these activities. I get to go out, I do jujitsu, stuff like that. I get to go out and talk with real people and see their faces sometimes. And now you have COVID where they shut everything down. And now they've exclusively, and I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here and say this is why they did it, but this is a byproduct of what they're doing.
It's the thing that happened.
Yeah. When they shut down all other alternatives of a physical public square and force you to go into these social media platforms, these spaces that are now monitored and fact checked, and you can get kicked off of them. Now this is the public square you're in, and they have complete control of it. Right? Think about it. Information is power, and us not being able to convey information to each other is just allowing them to maintain the power. And right when we talk about power, is they have the power, and the people who have allowed themselves to think independently, have their own power. But once they shut that down, they suppress those ideas, they suppress those voices. That power, goes away. So I think the control of information acts like a screen that allows the acceptable information to go through while blocking the others. And this is how they grow and maintain power.
So the public square, I also just think about, do you know what a town crier was?
Person who cried over everything.
That's right. Yeah. So there was a person in towns that would often have like a bell. You're thinking 16th, 17th century Europe. And they would be in the middle of town and they would proclaim news and information. And so that's what the town crier was. And in fact, a lot of early American newspapers were called the town crier because they were the place where you got information. And if you go to like ancient Roman settlements, whether in ancient Greece, Rome, Israel even has many of these. There was an area called the Cardo, and the Cardo was this big road that went. It was like the front of town, and it was paved, and it had like these archways and stuff. And then you'd go in, and there was there might be a fountain in the middle, and off of that is where you would have these little pathways that would go to the different shops and stuff. That was that public market, the town square, and that's where people would gather to talk, to meet, to confer, to go back and forth. When you think about even just like Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, those are the places where they would go and talk to people a lot of times to get to have these kind of public debates about stuff. So the public square was this place to debate ideas, to communicate ideas, observations, theories, hypothesis, whatever, and to put that out there, because at that point in time, there was this idea of, all I care about is what's true. So I'll just put this out here and we can talk about it, right? And so wherever truth ends up being whether it's within the idea I put out there or somewhere else, that's what I'm going to land on. I'm subservient to truth. You're subservient to truth. If you have a different idea than I do, let's take our ideas, let's put them next to each other and see what's good, what's bad. And that, as John Stuart Mill says, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. So this idea, like you said, and by the way, I don't think it's conspiratorial to say that tech was a big influence in, the let's say the monitoring and patrolling of the public square in a digital way, especially during COVID. What ends up happening there is if it's curated, it would be as if during pre-Reformation times, there are these public square debates and people are out and they're talking like, what do you think about what Luther did? And every time Luther is mentioned, someone shows up and just cuts their head off, out in that public square. And then it's like, well, guess we're not going to talk about Luther anymore. That's kind of what we're running into here. And Hayek is saying this is what the authoritarians do by censoring and curating this information. And I think your parallels with big tech are 100% spot on, because that's what we're seeing. I don't know if you saw, there was I don't know if this was Project Veritas or not, but there's a person who worked for Google for many years who came out maybe a week or two ago. It's within the last 2 weeks, and said, we prioritized all negative press for Donald Trump pretty early into the presidency.
Yeah.
In our algorithms. And that's that curation of the public square. That's a problem. That's a problem, because once again, as Hayek says, it's only truth. And we'll get into actually exactly his quote there, but it's not what's true that is most important. What's most important is, does it serve the plan or not? Does it serve the legitimation of our plan and of our power or not? Yeah. That's all that matters.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. That I do remember that Veritas clip where they did say they prioritize all the negative stuff. But even if you saw the negative breakdown by these third party people who just analyze the news, it's like they always came up with 95% negative, 5% positive. So there's not a lot of like positive to go around.
Where was the positive? What are they even talking about?
I don't know. He said that he didn't call Hillary Clinton a dog face one time, but.
Dog face pony soldier.
Exactly.
What was that?
That was Biden. But what you talking about, fat? I think
listen, fat.
But there's like so little positive press. And I'm not saying negative press is not truth. It doesn't mean it's untruth. There's plenty of negative things you can say about President
It's that we
Trump.
don't know.
Exactly. But even prioritizing a little bit in front of everything else. So it's like, already you kind of see an asymmetry of information that's getting out there more generally. If everyone had the objective scope of all of this information out there, all of the think pieces, opinion pieces out there, there's just a small section of it that would affirm anything that they like about Donald Trump. And then they prioritize everything else in front of that. So it's kind of that small minority of stuff that gets out there. That's what they silence. That's what they suppress. That's what they use the algorithms to make sure that goes to the bottom, and all the stuff that they favor goes to the top. So when I was talking about the conspiracy theory, I don't think it's conspiracy theory to say that they're curating their content. I think that's where you start with truth, because it's fairly obvious from what we know right now. My thing with conspiracy theory is I didn't want to think COVID was just this one thing to keep us out of the physical public square into the digital public square. I don't think that COVID was just made for that in a lab somewhere. I think it was made in a lab somewhere, but I don't think it was for that reason specifically. I just think
it was made in a lab somewhere. I think it was made in a lab in Wuhan, in China.
Yeah. John Stewart told me. I'm just saying.
Right. And it wasn't until he said that I could possibly advocate for that belief. That was the thing about that clip. I remember you posted it in your locals, and I was like, okay, fair enough. But it's like, let's not gloss over the fact that all of that information that Stewart had, and this goes with the plan and the hegemony, like none of that was new.
Oh yeah.
That motherfucker was keeping that to himself until Trump was out of office. So hell with him. And the fact that at the end of that, and the part 2 of that interview, which, kudos to him for saying it, but he felt safe saying it because, President was in. And at the end of that, when he's like, again to Stephen Colbert, he's like, you and Dave Chappelle is what got my family through this. It's like, okay, Dave Chappelle, fair enough, but Stephen Colbert, Stephen Colbert is what kept you sane during all this. It's like, that's like saying Rachel Maddow, man, if it weren't for Rachel Maddow, I would have never made it through this. You know, it's like, get the hell out of here. So anyway, but I think there is something to that of like a thing that might be true or might be valuable. You suppress it during the time when it's not useful. And then whenever it's not going to be an impediment to your side or to the plan or the planners, then you have the freedom to put it out there.
Yeah.
Right. And that's
you got to put it out there too, because when they look back and, you know, the next election cycle, let's say 2024, and they say, well, you guys were trying to shut this down. Well, no, remember when Jon Stewart came out 3 years later?
Yeah, Jon Stewart on. Yeah.
We came out with this. It's kind of like we weren't the people trying to defund the police. They were trying to defund the police, because one guy said one time that, maybe we shouldn't take all the money away out of the, we should defund them completely, those damn dirty pigs. But, so all they need to do is get that on tape, and they can point back to like, no, this is not, fact checkers, fact check me. It's like, only get one Pinocchio instead of 4 pants on fire, whatever it is. So yeah, that's their little out there
garbage.
Yeah, it's amazing. So this next section gets into what I think is hilarious isn't the right word. It's that part of vindication that it's like, I feel vindicated, but I'm also so sad that this is happening still. This is something that before the book, and the something is science. The manipulation of science, the abuse of the word science and the idea of science to fit political purposes was something they were doing in 44. And, I thought it was disgusting when I thought they started doing it. And, probably like early 2000s, started with the environmental movement, I think. It's not that I don't believe that there's, climate change or something like that. It's just they manipulate the science and say, these are all the things that are happening to forward our narrative. But, they believe, as I think it was a Tom McDonald quote from one of his rap songs, they believe that, a single-celled organism or water is life on Mars, but they don't believe a fetus is life on Earth. Yeah. So they manipulate science to just manipulate whatever political message they want to put forward.
Real fast before you get into that, remember, I just had to do a Control F because I wanted to find the thing, but remember how before even this book was published, he talks about how as the war drew to a close, entities like Science Magazine had advocated that science was to be used after the war to help a more advanced planned society and reconstruct along more rational lines. And
truth
so
is no longer a concern.
Exactly. It's whoa, we've got this. And he even gives that in the section I read where he talked about how let's do it like wartime. But you have Science Magazine, and so sorry to, but that's exactly what Hayek was warning about. And so the point is that he was talking about British socialists, not just Nazis, British socialists. So this is all endemic to collectivism. So.
Oh yeah. He'll use some examples of the socialist Nazis here, but it was certainly happening in Britain at his time, and obviously we see it happening today in America with mainstream. I would almost say they advertise it as a majority thought because, again, people are too afraid, I think, or they feel like they're not knowledgeable to push back against the science, as if science, which I hate science being used as some sort of religion or ideology. You must believe in science. No, you don't believe in science. You prove science. You can believe in religion. You can believe in an ideology, but science is not one of those things. So I think it's an important distinction that we blur now on purpose. So I've been the quote. This applies even to fields apparently most remote from any political interest, and particularly to all the sciences, even the most abstract. That in the disciplines dealing directly with human affairs and therefore most immediately affecting political views, such as history, right? Revisionist history, something I think we've heard of.
1619, bro.
Law, critical, critical legal studies, right?
Yep.
Or economics, which is like, the fact that we have socialists in 2021 is amazing. The wokenomics part of this is pretty crazy. To continue on, the disinterested search for truth cannot be allowed in a totalitarian system, and the vindication of the official views become the sole object is easily seen and has been amply confirmed by experience. These disciplines have indeed, in all totalitarian countries, become the most fertile factories of the official myths which the rulers use to guide the minds and wills of their subjects. It is not surprising that in these spheres, I like how he always uses the word spheres here. It's like this different area that you think is not connected to other areas, but it is not surprising that in these spheres, even the pretense that they search for truth is abandoned and the authorities decide what doctrines ought to be taught and published. At a certain point, you don't even have to worry about looking like you're trying to find truth. It is just, you take it. This is the science. Don't worry about researching it. You don't have to Google it. Or if you Google it, you're going to find all of our material anyways. This is the truth. Revisionist history. It's like America was only built on race. That was its main purpose, was just about race. The Civil War was just about slavery. This is the truth now. I'm not even worried, like, we're not going to look up facts and, what people said back then or any trends back then. We're just going to say this is now truth. You must believe it, or you're going to be ostracized as a non-believer or a Republican rube or something as awful as a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
So to continue on, totalitarian control of opinion extends, however, also to subjects which at first seem to have no political significance, right? We talked about it, economics
Virology.
does, right? Law, science. I mean, these things are not supposed to be overtly political. And that's how he starts this thing out. It's like remember the sphere of the political, everything becomes political when you have the plan, and everything needs to follow a political plan, right? Sometimes it is difficult to explain why particular doctrine should be officially proscribed or why others should be encouraged. And it is curious that these likes and dislikes are apparently somewhat familiar in the different totalitarian systems. In particular, they all seem to have in common an intense dislike of the more abstract forms of thought, dislike. I think that was a typo there. Thought, dislike, characteristically also shown by many of the collectivists among our scientists. So I'm sorry about the little typo there, but that's when I copy and paste from PDF into here, it automatically does that. Whether the theory of relativity is represented as a Semitic attack on the foundation of Christian and Nordic physics, or opposed because it is in conflict with the dialectical materialism and Marxist dogma, comes very much to the same thing. Nor does it make much difference whether certain theorems of mathematical statistics are attacked because they form part of the class struggle on the ideological frontier and are a product of the historical role of mathematics as the servant of the bourgeoisie, or whether the whole subject is condemned because it provides no guarantee that it will serve the interest of the people, right? If we feel like this finding does not serve the interest of the people, that's when you cover it up. I know, I think it was Charles Murray and Sam Harris had this discussion where he's like, I believe it was Sam actually is the one who brought it to him because he wrote the bell curve. Why would you even approach the topic of intelligence and race? It just seems like something that's not worth your time. It's not worth the hassle. I think Sam Harris's idea was like, why would you take all this blowback? I mean, this seems like an untouchable subject. Why would you take on this problem? And he was just like, it's science. This isn't for politics. This is just to find truth. And I believe as someone it was not Brett, it was Eric Weinstein, I believe, said that biology is often the study of things that you don't really want to find out and inconvenient truths. It's like stuff that you have to look for. You have to look for truth. Searching for truth is the objective. The objective switches when you make everything about politics and you follow the political plan. It switches to not finding truth, but find what reinforces the party. What helps us service the plan is the most important part. And that's why it corrupts all these institutions. 100%. Continue. It seems that pure mathematics is no less a victim, and that even the holding of particular views about the nature of continuity can be ascribed to bourgeoisie prejudices. According to the Webbs, the Journal for Marxist-Leninist Natural Sciences has the following slogans: "We stand for party in mathematics. We stand for purity of Marxist-Leninist theory in surgery." Man, you're about to go under the knife. Just picture yourself here. The gas, you're falling asleep. The surgeon's got the knife here, and he's basically asking you political questions to make sure that you're towing the party line.
Right.
or this is what Marx believes we should do. Or if he says, as you're fading out again, you're a white guy, and you're like, there's disparities between white and black outcomes, we need to make sure we equalize those disparities. Good night. And it's like, oh my God, like I'm scared, because the surgery is not for science sake. It is not meant to improve these practices to make sure these surgeries are successful. It is now made to serve the party and whatever goals they want. And a lot of times these goals have some sort of equity outcome that they're going for. And so that now switches the calculus from proficiency to whatever the party needs me to do, I will do. And that's something that's super scary if you're ever, or in mathematics, like who wants to so I am an engineer. I went to engineering school, real quick as a side note. I had a professor who was from Russia. They had a rule where, not Russia, I think it was one of the smaller countries outside of Russia. They had a rule that if you were an engineer and you built a bridge or you designed a bridge, by law, you had to stand under the bridge the first time it was tested. Like that's accountability, right?
It's good.
But now you have party in mathematics. It's like, how many people, knowing that they had to toe some sort of party line while developing drawings or sketches for this this bridge, how many people will be willing to stand under that bridge now?
Can I interrupt you here? Yeah. So just to wed this to today, people might be like, well, what? There's not going to be Marxist, Leninist, like no one's using math. So you said it seems that pure mathematics is no less a victim, and even the holding of particular views about the nature of continuity can be ascribed to bourgeoisie prejudices, according to the Webs. The Journal for Marxist-Leninist Natural Sciences has the following slogans: we stand for party in mathematics. Maybe we could substitute we stand for anti-racism in mathematics based on what I'm about to read. Yep. We stand for the purity of anti-racism in surgery. So let's go to mathematics. So again, he talks about, this is from the Journal of Natural Science Associated with Mathematics, is full of, quote, party in mathematics. Here is a few quotes from, this is Seattle, Washington's K through 12 proposed curriculum. This is from a few years ago. I'm reading from the PDF. This is www.k12 or k12.wa.us. So this is on their website. We can post it here. This is part of their K through 12 math ethnic studies framework. So this is from August 20th, 2019. So this is 2 years ago. Students will be able to analyze the ways in which ancient mathematical knowledge has been appropriated by Western culture. Students will be able to identify how the development of mathematics has been erased from learning in school, and students will be able to identify how math has been and continues to be used to oppress and marginalize people and communities of color. Those are, by the way, some of the milder things. I just put those in there because that lines up with what you just read, but there's so much in here of who determines what's the right answer, who determines what's wrong, how can we use math and activism, how can we use math to liberate. That's how we map this crazy. He is quoting fucking Nazis, actual Nazis and communists, in them trying to use math to justify their batshit crazy ideology. And here you have Marxist activists in the Seattle public school system now, today, making the same arguments. So whenever he's like, oh, they think the theory of relativity is just some, Jewish attack on Western culture, the same people here are saying, yeah, math is used to oppress people. How can we use it to liberate? Who decides what's the right answer anyway? And they literally talk about how we can switch from using math individually to how we can use math collectively. I mean, this is crazy shit, but this is absolutely pertinent to today because we're seeing the same crazy arguments with the same crazy and devastating and destructive outcomes today. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but that is exactly what Hayek is talking about.
Yeah. Two and two make five if the party needs it to.
That's right.
yeah, to finish this, the last paragraph here is entirely in keeping with the whole spirit of totalitarianism, that it condemns any human activity done for its own sake and without ulterior purpose. Science for science sake, art for art's sake are equally abhorrent to Nazis, our socialist intellectuals, and communists. You can't do it for its own sake. You got to do it for the party purpose, right? Every activity must derive its justification from the conscious social purpose. There must be no spontaneous, unguided activity because it might produce results which cannot be foreseen or for which the plan does not provide. The plan does not provide that 2 and 2 makes 5, or doesn't provide that it makes 4, then it's got to make something else. And it's got to make something that the party approves of according to its plan.
Whatever goes along with the plan. Doesn't matter.
Exactly. It might produce something new, undermined, again, that's another misspelled word, I think, of the philosophy.
Undreamt of.
There it is. Undreamt of it. In the philosophy of the planner, the principle extends even to games and amusements. I leave it to the reader to guess whether it was in Germany or in Russia, where the chess players were officially exhorted that we must finish once and for all the neutrality of chess. We must condemn once and for all chess for chess sake, like the formula art for art's sake. It's important here to understand that, you know, when he talks about science, when he talks about all these other things, they're used to vindicate political views. And that, you know, especially when he talks about science, you know, he talks about the science with the capital S and the TM over the E, you know, it's not actual science. So science, along with all these other tools, like I said before, revisionist history, critical legal studies, and moconomics, is no longer about the search for truth, but a way to validate power. And in this totalitarian control moves into other areas and subjects even further removed from politics, you know, like math and chess. Like chess doesn't seem like it should be political whatsoever, but they make it political here. And this reminds me of an observation made by someone else, but actually I want you to read this little subquote we have down here, because I like your relationship and one of these words to something else you and I have actually been listening to recently.
Which quote?
Right here, the one above. In a totalitarian state. Yeah.
In a totalitarian, so this is actually, by the way, folks, we don't always give you things in chronological order for the chapter. This is from earlier in the chapter, but we saved it for here because this German word is particularly relevant to this section. In a totalitarian state, all propaganda serves the same goal. Again, hegemony, they all agree with each other. The NBC and NPR and Harvard and the CDC are all on the same page. Wonder why. And all instruments of propaganda are coordinated to influence the individuals in the same direction, sameness, so as to produce the characteristic Gleichschaltung, which is German for coordination or sameness of all minds.
Yeah, and so Gleichschaltung is a word you've identified before, and someone else you've been listening to, in Curtis Yarvin uses it in one of his talks with interviews with someone else, but what I like about that is, you know, everyone needs to believe in the same thing, you know, sameness. We all need to be coordinated with the plan, and we must all be in line. And what I like about this, he gives this observation made by a guy named Victor Klempener, who is a German Jew who lived through Nazi Germany. He wasn't oppressed or persecuted during Nazi Germany, because I believe his wife was Aryan.
He had a German wife. Yeah.
So he had a German wife, but I guess this guy had an interest. So he had a bunch of cats, and he subscribed to a cat magazine.
He just said he had a cat. All right. We don't know how many cats.
I thought he said 30 cats. I don't know.
Shitting on cat owners.
I don't know. But he subscribed to a cat magazine. You have a cat. I imagine you subscribe to a cat magazine as well. But
I have 3 cats, and I do not have a cat magazine subscription.
Man, come on. But he noticed, you know, at the beginning of the war, it was this cat magazine, and toward, I think, the middle end of the war, you know.
So in 31, it was about cats. And then in 35, so again, this is nothing on Poland or annexation of Austria or anything like that. In 35, the cat magazine, because when was Hitler elected? What, 31? 31, right? So in 31, it's about cats. But by the way, I don't even know what the hell a cat magazine is about, especially in the 1930s, but whatever. It's Angela from The Office just taking pictures of Save Bandit.
Save Bandit. Yep.
But in 35, it's the German cat. Right. it's not just about, and the way Klemper describes it is that so brown was the color of, what the Nazis, or the brown coats and the brown shirts, right? And he says we're all swimming in the same brown sauce. And so it's not just the cat, it's the German cat. Anyway, so that's what he said. That's that glacial tongue. Everything is coordinated. Everything is sameness. And actually, Yarvin says that now today, whenever he flips open the New York Times and looks at their section about cooking, he's like the German cat, and that's the glacial tongue of how the New York Times and all these institutes coordinate today.
Yeah, so that's why now I have this idea of the German cat when I identify stuff that is no longer has its essential, the essence of the original thing. You can't do this thing for the sake of doing the thing. You can't play chess for the sake of doing chess. You have to do it for the sake of the party. German cat right there. You can't do math without some pre-approval from the state to make sure it follows the plan, that you don't get these crazy numbers that might disprove something that they're trying to, force down the people's throat. Again, German cat. There's all of these modifiers that go on to these different ideas, institutions, and even what I would say some, load-bearing structures of society that they kind of transform into the German cat, into the German math, the German physics, German science. And we see that a lot today because that is some way to mask truth, is when you don't allow truth to get out there, or if there is any truth that gets out there, you're the screen for that truth, and only, particular pieces gets to come out. As long as it advocates and serves the plan, then it's okay to come out in full.
That was a legitimate criticism against Taylor Swift for a long time. She just made music and didn't make political statements.
Yeah.
And so, and that was whenever she would tweet out, go out and vote. People were mad. Why aren't you telling people who to vote for? Right. And so it really was, these are things we joke about, what's Taylor have to say? I mean, that's the joke that Dave Chappelle made. Where's Ja? We need Ja Rule to tell us.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, and so it's like, you can't just do music for music's sake. Like, what are you doing? I mean, remember Chris Pratt, all of these actors who were involved in the Avengers movies were going to go do a fundraiser for Joe Biden, and Pratt's like, yeah, I'm not interested. He didn't go do a fundraiser or an event for Donald Trump. He just said, I'm not interested in doing this one for Joe Biden. And there's all of these things on Twitter about canceling Chris Pratt. It's like, you can't just be an actor. You can't just do music, right? This has to be this and only this. If you're not feeding this thing, these mass lines of action in communism, as Marx describes, then you're doing it wrong. It has to be part of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and even the Chris Pratt example, he didn't even say stuff originally because he trends to get canceled about once a month, it seems.
Totally.
And his original statements were just about God, and people being surprised that he's a religious Christian, and people not being okay with that because, Christianity, one, has an objective moral framework associated with it that is going to bump up against the moral code that is being pushed down by the people. By the state, by the people who want to plan things, people who want to take power. And two, it's just something so rarely seen in entertainment nowadays that it's like, once he steps outside of all these people who are standing in a straight, perfect line, that is justification enough to try to cancel him, to try to.
And that's the doubt part, right? It's not even that he's advocating for something else. He's like, I'm just not doing that thing.
He didn't have a mega hat on.
That's enough.
Right. You didn't have a mega hat on, but you're already too far out of the Overton window they put here. You're spreading out in the wrong direction. And once they see you in the wrong direction, they're too scared that, man, you go way out in the wrong direction.
That's over.
And they need to rein you in before any of that happens.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So then we have the last third of this section here that goes a little bit more into science and not serving truth, and it's important to close it out here. So quote, incredible as some of these aberrations may appear, we must yet be on guard not to dismiss them as mere accidental byproducts which have nothing to do with the essential character of a planned or totalitarian system. They are not. They are a direct result of the same desire to see everything directed by a unitary conception of the whole, of the need to uphold at all costs the views in the service of which people are asked to make constant sacrifices, and of the general idea that the knowledge and beliefs of people are an instrument to be used for a single purpose. Once science has to serve not truth, but the interests of a class, the community, or state, the sole task of argument and discussion is to vindicate and to spread still further the beliefs by which the whole life of the community is directed. As the Nazi Minister of Justice has explained, the question which every new scientific theory must ask itself is, do I serve National Socialism for the greatest benefit of all? Right here, it's like you need to serve the plan, serve the state. And, you know, as Orwellian, or we call it Orwellian now, is something as the Minister of Justice, which is like the czar of something else. You know, the Minister of Justice is effectively the CDC now, right? Because they can make all these rules.
A little bit, yeah.
So as scary as it sounds, they're much more open about their labels in Nazi Germany because they could. Today, again, because these power systems need to be a bit more covert, they allow these bureaucracies to take over and act as those ministries of justice and be those unelected bureaucrats that can control more of our lives.
Well, and even in there, when what you just read, where he says the need to uphold at all costs the views in the service of which people are asked to make constant sacrifices. Do we have any analogs for that today? Right. No. Anything today where people were asked to make sacrifices or do certain things, and we have to uphold the views
for the greater good, Truman.
That's right. That's right. So we have no analogs for that today. No one's been asked to sacrifice things and then build up resentment whenever what they've been promised doesn't happen. Okay, I was just curious. I didn't think anything like that would happen.
No, not unless for the greater good. The word truth itself ceases to have its old meaning. It describes no longer something to be found with the individual conscience as the sole arbiter of whether in any particular instance the evidence or the standing of those proclaiming it warrants a belief. It becomes something to be laid down by authority, something which has to be believed in the interest of the unity of the organized effort, and which may have to be altered as the exigencies of this organized effort require it. So again, everything needs to be according to the plan. Everything needs to be organized according to the plan. It needs to be complete unity, or be advertised complete unity, right? It's the scientific consensus is advertised as this complete unity.
And they get there. How do they land on truth and consensus? Do they come up with it on their own, or is it administered to them? Is it laid down for them?
Right.
That's what he says there, right? It's laid down by authority.
Yeah.
Right. So don't trust any of your observations. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. I'm going to keep bringing it back to COVID. I don't care.
Yeah.
This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Don't worry about the fact that we have all these reports about, what was it yesterday? Jesse Jackson and his wife, fully vaccinated, come down with COVID, the space AIDS variant. They got the D, and there it is. But you know what I mean? And so truth is a thing that is fed to you, not a thing that you're working out in your own mind.
Yeah, it's absolutely fed to you. It's something you have to believe in. And they say there's a consensus on this, but then you hear of like doctors all the time getting silenced. If there was a consensus on this, you really think you'd have to put a fact check on every single thing that has the word COVID pandemic
excellent observation.
or coronavirus in it? Well, no, it's kind of like the idea of common sense. The common sense is never something you have to proclaim, or it's not common sense. If you ever have to say this is common sense, it's not, because you would know it already intuitively if it were. So now here, the general intellectual climate which this produces, the spirit of complete cynicism as regards truth, or as regards to truth, which it endangers, the loss of the sense or even the meaning of truth, the disappearance of the spirit of independent inquiry and of the belief in the power of rational conviction, the way in which differences of opinion in every branch of knowledge become political issues to be decided by authority, are all things which one must personally experience. No short description can convey their extent. Perhaps the most alarming fact is the contempt for intellectual liberty is not a thing which arises only once the totalitarian system is established, but one which can be found everywhere among intellectuals who have embraced a collectivist faith and who are acclaimed as intellectual leaders, even in countries still under a liberal regime. Real quick, liberal right here. I think we kind of explained it.
There it is.
Yeah,
it is in this
So we
chapter.
use it a couple of times. Liberal is the 19th century European sense where you stay away or you advocate against all forms of coercion by the government.
Right.
Whereas liberal, if you're listening to this in America now, which I imagine most of you are, it means completely the opposite. That's where the derivation of libtard comes from, which is completely stupid.
Polar opposite.
So you actually advocate for socialism, effectively this. So if you're reading it that way, it's going to mean the complete opposite, but liberal regime meaning liberal, conservative, American conservative, libertarian. Continue. Not only is even the worst oppression condemned if it is committed in the name of socialism and the creation of a totalitarian system openly advocated by people who pretend to speak for the scientists of liberal countries, intolerance too is openly extolled. Have we not recently seen a British scientific writer defend even Inquisition because, in his opinion, it is beneficial to the science when it protects a rising class? This view is, of course, particularly indistinguishable from the views which led the Nazis to the persecution of men of science, the burning of scientific books, and the systematic eradication of the intelligentsia of the subjected people. So basically what he's going down here is truth no longer matters because it no longer means objective facts in reality. So something you pointed out really aptly at the beginning is that there needs to actually be like an objective reality for truth to mean anything. Because if there's no objective reality, then there is no truth. But now it just means whatever the authority deems is best for the plan. So everything must serve the plan, right? Science must serve the plan. Education must serve the plan. Law must serve the plan. History and how we remember it, right? Revisionist history, 1619 project, that serves the plan. Reality must serve the plan. So nothing maintains its original essence anymore. And we're no longer in the arena of just changing words. We are changing the perception of reality itself. And that is this change here. Yes, you can start out by slowly changing these words, but as you change the words, you start to change the reality of these people as you throw these words under science, under law, under education. That's the important power that comes with this. It's not just as simple as, switching out equality for equity, although that example right there does change perceptions of reality if you don't explain the differences between those two words.
What's remarkable to me, and I was literally just thinking about the equality and equity thing, is they will redefine words, but whenever they do start using new words like equity, I mean, it still blows my mind that Vice President Harris released that video the day before the election about the difference between equality and equity, and it was about the creating the moral virtues of creating quality of outcome. Absolutely insane. And so in those cases, they will be honest about the definition of words. They will just go back to what Hayek talks about here, where they'll use their ethical code or whatever to justify. So they have to get people on board with the ethical code, and then they have to get people on board with the means, equity, right, of creating or facilitating that ethical code. But in the other cases, I mean, diversity, equity, inclusion, diversity and inclusion are two words that absolutely mean different things. Equity is the one, and I think even Lindsay does a breakdown. This is maybe a year ago where he breaks down the DIE stuff, and he's like, equity is the one that actually they don't change the meaning of it all. They don't mean a different thing. This is exactly what they mean. They are relying on your misunderstanding of it. But diversity means something else. Equity or inclusion, it means exclusion. Diversity actually means hegemony and conformity. I mean, these all mean completely different things. Literally almost in most cases the exact opposite, right? Compassion means the opposite. Oppressor often is the the person being oppressed in that specific situation. You're the oppressor in this situation. I didn't do anything. I'm not feeling like that. I'm feeling like the opposite, right? But that's what they'll do. That's absolutely what they'll do. And like you said, they change perceptions of reality accordingly as a result. That's where this crap terraforms reality and uses a false perception of consensus along the lines of these crazy ass definitions to change their outcomes in reality, to change the outcomes.
Yeah. Reality is a difficult, or at least objective reality is a difficult thing to properly define as it is. So I think it kind of makes it easier, right? I think we've had a discussion with someone before, and they're adamant saying that I don't believe that objective reality is actually a thing. There's too many realities perceived by different people, but I believe objective reality to be, I think I've explained maybe in a previous podcast, it's like a puzzle. It's where everyone's got what they've seen, their subjective reality that they see, and you need to piece different subjective realities together and look at the underlying facts that match up to actually build a picture of what objective reality is. It's a lot.
And gravity doesn't care. Gravity doesn't care what my perception of it is.
Try to jump off a roof and see if it works. If you can identify as a woman, you can identify as Superman. I'm just saying.
And that's true, and I think that's been confirmed. So
yeah. But it's something that's already easy to take advantage of, along with, like you said before, most people don't particularly tend toward independent thinking. So taking advantage of those two aspects to terraform reality for most people, and most people aren't going to push back against that attempt, no matter how overt it is, makes it fairly easy to do so and gain power and traction like this.
Yep.
Yeah.